Okay, so in today's lecture, I'd like to go ahead and continue with Unit 3, which is all the I/O management concepts. And so far, we've really looked into managing our streams, our input-output streams. And so we've defined that there's two different types of streams previously, right? The byte streams and the character streams. And so I would like to continue our venture, our exposure, our adventure in the character streams. So the next character stream I'd like to introduce you to is the file reader, which is going to be a type of input stream. And this particular presentation, we'll take a look at an introduction for the file reader. We'll do the class declaration, the constructors, the methods, and the examples. So here, FileReader in Java is an input stream that reads data in the form of characters from a text file. So in other words, a file reader is a character-based input stream that is used to read characters from a file. So the FileReader class is a subclass of the input stream reader. As recall that we said that was probably the most important of the concrete classes of the reader class, because FileReader and many the other subclasses are going to build off of that. So so the input stream reader itself extends reader, because that's abstract, and it implements the closable, auto-closable, and readable interfaces. So your general syntax, if you were to look at the source code to see how the file reader was implemented, would be a public class, concrete class, file reader. It extends the input stream reader, so it's a member of that. And since input stream reader extends reader, it's also a member of reader, and it also implements closable, auto-closable, and readable interfaces. So your hierarchy, if you were to look at this, inside of the API would look just like this here. Okay, so let's take a look at the constructors. There's a couple different constructors that are available to us for FileReader. We have a FileReader constructor where we can pass in a file reference type. And if the file doesn't exist, then that's going to throw a file not found exception. We have another constructor here where we can pass in the file name as a string. And so again, if the file isn't found, it'll throw a file not found exception. And we can also pass in a file as a file descriptor object. We also have the ability to pass in a file, a reference to a file into the file reader constructor. And then as a second parameter, we can pass in a char set, which would be a non-default set of characters that we'd want to use to parse the file. And we can do that either with a file reference type or using a string that represents the file path, the file name, which is mainly how we've been doing most of our file access in our sample code. And just one additional note, since we're talking about constructors, the FileReader constructor internally creates a file input stream to read the bytes from the specified file and converts them into Unicode characters with the help of its superclass input stream reader. So that's why we're extending that file input stream. And because FileReader does not define any read method or other methods of its own, it inherits all its methods from its superclass. So with that said, let's move to the methods for FileReader. So the FileReader does not define any new methods. It inherits everything from either the reader class, the abstract class reader, or the input stream reader. So the inherited methods are from input stream reader would be get encoding, read, two different reads, right? They have, it's been overloaded, and a ready method. And we've seen all of these in a prior lecture and sample codes. And then also inside of reader, we have the ability for closing the stream, mark, whether the checking to see if mark supported, the null reader, the overloaded methods for being able to read from the stream, resetting where we're currently at in the stream, being able to skip bytes in the stream, and transfer to, where we can transfer from the data from a reader stream to a writer stream. Excellent. So let's look at some quick examples here. So in the first example I'd like to show here is one where we are try to read some characters from a file that's called myfile.txt using the FileReader class. So let's jump into our code, FileReader tester 1. So I usually like to do the walkthroughs in IntelliJ. So let's do that. We were using FileReader. So I have a FileReader tester here. This is the code from the slide. Let's take a look. So we're going to go ahead and import this file not found exception, because recall whenever we invoke that constructor, it could potentially throw that. So we need to have that imported so we could potentially catch it. We're going to have a FileReader, which is the concrete class we're going to be using in this example code, and an IO exception, because all the other, anytime we use any of these IO operations, it's a checked exception for that. So I'm going to create a new example class here called FileReader tester 1. I'm going to have a main method. I'll just have my main method throw the IO exception, but I'm still going to need that try catch block for this file not found exception. So here you can see this is going to be the try portion, where we'll have all of our code that could potentially throw exceptional behavior in there. And so for the catch, we'll go ahead and catch a file not found exception if it were to be thrown. And then we'll just go ahead and report that error message to the console if that occurs. So inside the source code, what we're going to do is create a FileReader object with a pass. So we're going to use the string version of the constructor that we saw. We're going to create a loop control variable of integer I that's going to hold a character that we can read from our FileReader. And then we're just going to loop through. So we'll read a character at a time. So we'll here from our FileReader, we'll read and bind that. We'll save that into that variable here, I. And we'll then evaluate it. So long as I is not equal to -1, recall that -1 is returned with read as an end of stream, effectively like an end of file sentinel value. So until that happens, we will continually read each character from our stream. We'll cast the integer into a character and print it out. And actually, let's go ahead and let's see, first of all, what's inside of my file. So I have my file right in here inside my IntelliJ. Right here, it just says it's a collection of capitals and and let's see here. I've fiddled around with the sample code so much. Let's see what the expected output is here. So welcome to Java programming. We'll change it to what we expect it to be. So here we'll just do welcome to Java programming. Perfect, save that, okay. So now that we have contents inside of my file.txt, let's run this. And there, okay, so you see we loop through, we're printing to the console each character until we get to the end, which is gonna be the -1. And then we're gonna close our stream. You always wanna close our streams after we're done. And that's it, that's gonna be our example here. Excellent. And so that's just a quick explanation for FileReader. So you could see how we can use that to quickly read the contents of a text file into our Java application.